Imagine you're at a dinner party. You sit down, you tuck your napkin into your collar, and the main course literally walks out of the kitchen.
Right, like on its own two legs.
Exactly. It strolls right up to the table and it actively begs you to eat it. I mean, it points at its own tenderest cuts, it offers a suggestion on the best wine pairing for its own ribs, and then it just happily climbs into the oven.
It's the ultimate hospitality.
Yeah. It sounds like this bizarre, just utterly ridiculous sci-fi comedy sketch. But if you take a closer look at the actual natural world around you, offering yourself up to be eaten alive isn't a joke. Well, it is actually one of the most mathematically successful biological strategies on Earth.
Which is exactly why we are stepping away from the traditional, harmonious view of nature today. Because we really like our biology to feel poetic, I think. We look at a forest or a savanna and we project this sense of balance.
Like the whole circle of life thing.
Yeah, this beautiful circle where every creature is just striving for longevity and health and peace. We assume the fundamental operating system of literally every living thing is self-preservation.
But the sources we're exploring in today's deep dive, which is centered around this pretty notorious excerpt, simply titled Chapter 29, Dying for Sex.
Ugh.
They completely obliterate that assumption, just wipe it out.
Oh, entirely.
And what's wild is that the very first thing you encounter in this text, it isn't a sweeping description of a lush jungle or anything. It's an image, just this dark, cold, black square.
Yeah, the illustration.
Right. Inside that square is a perfectly white circle. And inside that circle is this brutal, highly stylized abstraction of a human figure. Like it's a solid black dot for a head, a heavy inverted triangle for a torso, two straight geometric columns for legs.
There are no arms.
No arms, no face, no humanity at all, just basic, heavy geometry.
And that clinical reduction of the human form, it perfectly primes you for the thesis we are exploring today. The source material basically strips away all the romance, all the societal narratives, and all the poetry that we use to explain our desires. It leaves us staring at this raw, calculating, and frankly, somewhat terrifying biological engine.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the mission of this deep dive is to explore the central, staggering claim presented in these sources, which is that the drive to survive, the instinct that tells you to pull your hand away from a hot stove or look both ways before crossing the street, is actually completely secondary to the drive to reproduce.
Survival is really just a waiting room.
Right. The absolute prioritization of sex over survival dictates some of the most irrational, dangerous, and just baffling behaviors in the entire animal kingdom. And uncomfortably, it dictates human behavior too. Which means it dictates your behavior listening to this right now.
It forces a total reevaluation of what we consider rational. I mean, if you operate under the assumption that Mother Nature's ultimate goal for you is a long, safe life, then the world looks completely insane.
Yeah, nothing makes sense.
Exactly. But the moment you realize the only goal is the successful transmission of genetic material, suddenly the absolute madness of the world starts to make a very cold, mathematical kind of sense.
So, to understand just how extreme this gets, we have to look at how the text introduces this concept. Because it bridges that gap between the absurd fiction I mentioned earlier and an even stranger reality. The author actually brings up Douglas Adams and his famous novel, The Restaurant at the End of the Universe.
Right, the Meghlian major cow.
Yes. Adams describes this scene where aliens have genetically engineered a breed of cow, and this animal has been bred to talk, and specifically to desire to be consumed. Like, it prances around presenting its, and this is a, quote, tender and juicy rumps to the dinner guests.
And the author uses that sci-fi joke to pose a really serious evolutionary question. Could genes ever actually select for an animal that actively wants to be eaten?
Which defies every single rule of the self-preservation instinct.
Completely. A novice looking at evolutionary biology would immediately say no, because any gene that encourages suicide would instantly be removed from the gene pool, right? Because the organism carrying it would die before it could pass the gene on.
Right, it deletes itself.
Exactly. But the real world provides an immediate, shocking answer to that question. And the answer is the male black widow spider.
Man, the black widow. So what's fascinating here is the sheer mechanical brutality of the black widow's mating process.
Yeah, the text really doesn't hold back on this. During copulation, the male black widow performs what arachnologists actually call a copulatory somersault.
A somersault.
A somersault. He inserts his pedipalp to transfer genetic material, and then he deliberately backflips his own abdomen directly into the female's fangs.
Oh my God.
While they are still mating, she injects her venom and begins dissolving his internal organs. She is engaging in literal necrophilia, eating his body while he finishes the act of procreation.
She is eating his butt while they mate.
Ah,
Like, that is the exact phrasing in the source text.
yeah.
That brings up such a pointed question for you, the listener, and for us. If the sci-fi cow wanting to be eaten is a laugh-out-loud joke, why is the spider doing almost the exact same thing considered a masterclass in biology?
Because we have to separate the survival of the individual from the survival of the genetic code. From a purely genetic standpoint, this is a highly successful, fiercely calculated strategy.
I look at it kind of like watching a grandmaster play chess. You know, you're analyzing the board, and suddenly the player deliberately sacrifices their most powerful piece, maybe their queen. To someone who just learned the rules of chess, it looks like a catastrophic blunder. It looks like they just threw the whole game away. But the grandmaster is sacrificing that piece to force the opponent into a specific position, trapping the king and achieving the ultimate win condition. The individual piece is lost, sure, but the player wins the game.
That's a great analogy. The spider is giving up the board entirely just to secure the genetic win.
Yeah.
We really need to break down the cold calculus behind what the text explicitly labels a smart suicide. Let's look at the actual biological mechanics of why this works. Because a male spider who allows courtship to end in cannibalism actually passes on significantly more genes than a male who survives the encounter and runs away.
See, that feels completely counterintuitive.
Yeah.
You would assume the guy who lives to mate with a second or a third female would mathematically produce more offspring. That just seems obvious.
Well, it assumes he can easily find a second female, survive the long journey to her web, and successfully court her without getting eaten before mating begins.
All right.
The odds of all that happening out in the wild are astronomically low. But look at the immediate mechanics of the sacrifice itself. By performing that somersault, the male provides the female with a massive nutrient-dense meal right at the exact moment of fertilization.
So he's directly fueling the pregnancy.
Exactly. He is directly fueling the production of his own offspring. Furthermore, the digestion process takes a long time. By keeping her occupied with eating his body, he actually prolongs the copulation, ensuring a massive, uninterrupted transfer of sperm.
Wow. So he is literally buying fertilization time with his own lifeblood.
And achieving a monopoly on her reproductive output. A fully satiated female, one that just ate her mate, has a drastically decreased chance of being receptive to another male.
Because she's full.
Because she's full.
That's good.
If he survives and runs away, she remains hungry. She might mate with the very next male who comes along just to get another meal, which dilutes the original male's chances of passing on his specific genes. His suicide physically blocks rival sperm from entering the equation.
His death is the absolute best insurance policy for his genetic legacy. It's crazy. But I do want to highlight an important distinction the text makes here. It notes, quote, he probably isn't calculated about it. It's not like the spider is, perched on a leaf with a tiny little spreadsheet doing a cost-benefit analysis of his own demise.
Right, he's not planning it. Genes simply make him impulsive. The behavior is hardwired. Imagine 1,000,000 years ago, a random genetic mutation made one male spider slightly more reckless, slightly more prone to tumbling forward during mating.
Okay.
He got eaten, sure, but because of the mechanics we just discussed, he fathered 50 more spiderlings than the cautious males who ran away. Those 50 offspring carried that same reckless gene. Over thousands of generations, the math compounds. The cautious spiders go extinct because they don't block rival sperm.
And the stupid, impulsive spiders conquer the whole population.
Exactly. It completely redefines our entire concept of biological success.
Yeah, because for humans, success is living to a ripe old age, maybe retiring to Florida, and dying peacefully in your sleep. But for the natural world, success is winning the genetic lottery, even if the price of the ticket is your own immediate, violent death.
It really gives tremendous philosophical weight to that phrase, smart suicide. It's an oxymoron to the human mind, but it is the absolute bedrock of evolutionary persistence. And having established that these male spiders are biologically programmed for sacrificial death, the text takes a very, very bold comparative leap here.
Oh yeah, it really goes there.
The author attempts to map these extreme animal kingdom dynamics directly onto human ideological frameworks, specifically the politics of feminism.
Right. And we need to be very clear here. For you listening, we are just unpacking the text's specific framing and rhetorical choices. We aren't endorsing this view. The source material claims that what it terms moderate feminists find very little ideological support in the natural world. And the rationale the text provides is that in almost all mammalian species, males are universally more aggressive, dominant, and insensitive, while females are more interested in rearing the young and maintaining social cohesion.
So the author is drawing a direct line from generalized mammalian dimorphism, the physical differences between sexes, to modern, moderate human political stances, suggesting a deep biological precedent for certain traditional gender dynamics.
But then the text pivots entirely to the insect world. It claims that what it calls radical feminists can find immense biological support, but they have to look to the, quote, insect queendom.
The insect queendom.
Yeah. The text argues that among insects, females are overwhelmingly larger, more aggressive, and vastly smarter than the males. And the prime exhibit the author brings to the stand is the female praying mantis.
Right. The praying mantis is the classic visceral example of extreme sexual dimorphism and insect power dynamics. The text describes how, while actively engaged in coitus, the female praying mantis will reach back, grasp her lover, literally decapitate him, and drink the blood from his neck.
That's brutal.
And the detail that truly hammers the point home for the author is that this act of decapitation actually improves the headless male's reproductive performance.
Now, I have to push back on the author's framing here, because by taking highly specific, nuanced human political constructs like moderate feminism and radical feminism and projecting them onto mindless insects, the author is arguably projecting complex societal issues onto basic, blind biological programming. I mean, a praying mantis doesn't have a political ideology.
No, of course not.
It doesn't hold rallies. It just has hunger and reproductive instincts. Applying human political labels to bugs feels like using shock value to make a backdoor commentary on human social movements.
That's a very fair critique. Let's analyze the rhetorical strategy the author is deploying, because it is highly calculated. Immediately after detailing the female mantis drinking the male's neck blood to improve his performance, the author writes, quote, "All sorts of metaphors can be derived from this, which I refuse to entertain here."
I refuse to entertain the exact metaphors I just spent 2 paragraphs explicitly setting up for you.
It's a classic rhetorical device known as apophasis. Bringing up a subject by vehemently denying that it should be brought up.
Right.
By stating a refusal to entertain the metaphors, the author effectively forces the reader's brain to dwell exclusively on those exact metaphors.
It's very clever.
But if we strip away the provocative political labels for a second and just look at the raw biology of the mantis example, it reveals an incredible mechanism of subverted power dynamics.
Okay, walk me through the actual biology of that improvement. Like, how does losing your literal head make you better at mating? That sounds impossible.
It comes down to the male insect's nervous system. Unlike humans, whose central nervous system is heavily concentrated in the brain, insects have these clusters of nerve tissue called ganglia distributed throughout their bodies.
Okay, so it's decentralized.
Yes. In the male praying mantis, the brain actually sends inhibitory signals down to the ganglia in the abdomen, essentially telling the body to stay calm, hold back, and control its movements. When the female bites off his head, she removes that inhibitory control entirely.
It cuts the brake lines.
Exactly. The abdominal ganglia take over completely, causing the headless body to thrust with extreme uncontrolled vigor, which transfers sperm much, much more efficiently.
Wow. So his biological purpose is literally fueled and enhanced by his own destruction at the hands of the female. His decapitation isn't just a byproduct of her hunger, it is the physical mechanism that allows him to succeed.
Right.
It is a total inversion of the mammalian dynamic, where the dominant male controls the encounter.
Nature doesn't possess a single, unified morality or a preferred political structure. It simply selects for whatever works in a given environment. And in the insect queendom, whatever works often involves the violent consumption of the male.
Clearly.
But the text expands the scope of the danger here. Power imbalances and cannibalistic mates aren't the only fatal risks in the mating game. Sometimes, the simple, seemingly innocent act of just trying to get a date is a deadly endeavor all on its own.
Right. The text lists a series of animals that risk absolutely everything just to be noticed by a potential mate. It starts with this beautifully deceptive description of the lightning bug. The text says a lightning bug casts a lantern flash of love like a semaphore across the night.
Very poetic.
It sounds like poetry. It sounds like a romantic Disney animation.
Yeah.
But the text immediately drops the hammer on that imagery, because that beautiful glowing lantern flash acts as a giant beacon, making him highly visible and incredibly easy prey for bats swooping through the dark.
The lightning bug is essentially turning on a spotlight in a pitch-black room full of assassins, solely on the off chance that a female lightning bug happens to see it before a bat does.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not just visual beacons drawing in the assassins, it's auditory ones too. The text focuses on the female mosquito next. Now, we normally think of mosquitoes in terms of the annoyance of getting bitten, right? But the focus here is her courtship behavior.
Right.
The text points out that her high-pitched wail, the whine that drives us absolutely crazy in the middle of the night, is absolute music to the male mosquito's antenna. But that same exact sound is highly grating to the ears of the giant, whose blood she desperately needs to feed her developing eggs.
The giant in this scenario being a human or a large mammal.
Right, so she is broadcasting a frequency that attracts a mate, but simultaneously alerts the giant predator, inviting an immediate crushing death from a massive hand. If you strip away the biology and look at this as a purely tactical decision, imagine a person walking through a highly dangerous predator-filled neighborhood in the dead of night. And to attract a date, they decide their absolute best strategy is to wear a flashing neon sign on their chest and blow an air horn every 10 seconds.
You would declare that the absolute worst conceivable strategy for individual survival
is tactical suicide. You would grab that person and say, turn off the neon sign, throw away the air horn, and hide in the shadows.
Yeah, logically.
But the terrifying logic of the text dictates that for the biological mission of reproduction, the neon sign and the air horn are the only viable strategy. Because if you hide in the shadows, yeah, you survive the night, but you die alone. Your genetic code is permanently erased from the earth.
We have to fundamentally shift our perspective to grasp the core tenet running through these sources. The individual organism is entirely expendable. The continuation of the genetic code is the only paramount concern. And the text actually invokes a pretty heavy psychological framework to explain this intersection of sex and death, noting that Sigmund Freud would have a field day with the male spider.
Yeah, that stuck out to me. Why bring Freud into a discussion about spider anatomy and lightning bug flashes?
Yeah.
It felt like a bit of a leap.
Well, the author invokes Freud to point toward one of his most famous and darkest psychoanalytic theories. It was published in his 1920 essay, Beyond the Pleasure Principle. Freud proposed that all human behavior is driven by the interplay between two opposing forces, Eros and Thanatos.
Okay, break those down.
Eros represents the life drive, the urge for sex, creation, reproduction, and self-preservation. Thanatos represents the death drive, an inherent urge towards self-destruction, a return to an inorganic state, aggression, and massive risk-taking.
So an internal battle between the drive to create life and the drive to destroy it.
Exactly. In human psychology, Freud argued these drives are often in conflict, creating neuroses. But the text points out that in the male spider, or the flashing lightning bug, or the whining mosquito, Eros and Thanatos aren't in conflict at all. They are perfectly inextricably fused.
Because they happen at the exact same time.
Yes. The ultimate expression of the life drive procreation is physically manifested through a literal suicide mission. The death drive is the necessary vehicle for the life drive. You cannot have sex without inviting death. The two concepts are literally a single biological imperative.
Man, it makes you look at a lightning bug in a completely different way. It's not just a cute blinking light in your backyard. It's a tiny, flying embodiment of Eros and Thanatos battling it out against the evolutionary odds.
It really is.
But to understand why males in particular seem to take the brunt of these fatal risks, why the male spider dies, why the male lightning bug flashes, the deep dive shifts gears away from the poetic behaviors and dives into the stark, cold biological economics driving them.
And the text makes a remarkably blunt, provocative assertion to transition into this economic view. It states, flatly, males are crazy because sperm are worthless.
Sperm are worthless. It is an aggressive, definitive statement. The text explains that because sperm is incredibly cheap to produce metabolically and so wildly abundant, the competition among males to distribute it is incredibly fierce. The text lays out the ultimate biological stakes. A male either hits the genetic jackpot by securing what the author calls extra wombs, or he dies entirely celibate. There is zero middle ground.
Zero.
Therefore, showing off to secure those wombs is infinitely more important than playing it safe.
It is a purely quantitative economic analysis of biological material. The concept at play here is called anisogamy, the fundamental difference in size and metabolic cost between male and female sex cells.
I actually want to push back heavily on the author's use of the word worthless here, though.
Okay, why?
Because if you analyze the economics purely based on the text's own arguments, if something is truly worthless, there wouldn't be fierce, violent competition to distribute it.
Yeah.
I mean, people don't fight to the death over dirt. I think a far better economic analogy, sticking strictly to the parameters the source provides, is that the biological material itself doesn't lack intrinsic value. It's that the market is catastrophically oversupplied.
Ah, I see. The supply side is hopelessly saturated. A single male can theoretically produce enough sperm to fertilize every female on the continent, making his individual contribution mathematically abundant.
Exactly. Wait, taking that a step further, the text emphasizes the pursuit of wombs. The wombs are the ultimate bottleneck in this biological economy. They are the scarce, highly restricted resource. Producing an egg, gestating an embryo, and raising offspring requires massive energy, time, and physical vulnerability.
And it's a huge biological investment.
Right, because the demand, the available wombs ready for fertilization, is infinitesimally low compared to the virtually infinite supply of sperm. It makes the supply desperately cheap. It's a buyer's market taken to a fatal extreme.
If we connect this economic disparity to the bigger picture, it explains why the text argues that survival is secondary, sex is all. When you understand the binary nature of this biological economy, that you either monopolize the scarce resource and produce lots of offspring, or you face complete unrecorded genetic erasure, you understand how that absolute threshold breeds absolute desperation.
If the penalty for playing it safe is that your lineage goes extinct forever, then playing it safe is actually the most dangerous thing you can possibly do.
Yes.
And this absolute desperation manifests in a universal language across countless species. We move from the theory of economic competition to the actual physical risks males take just to get the attention of the buyer in this market. The text outlines the deadly art of showing off.
The author provides a rapid-fire compilation of biological extravagance that actively invites death. It's a really vivid list.
It lists a male gazelle who spots a tiger or a cheetah stalking through the grass. Instead of hiding or using his energy to run away silently, the gazelle jumps straight up and down in the air in front of the predator just to attract attention to himself.
Right.
It lists the peacock, who expends massive metabolic energy to grow a giant, heavy, brightly colored tail that tangles in the brush and makes him incredibly easy prey. It mentions 20 massive sea lions fighting, biting, and bleeding out on a beach, trying to hoard dozens of mates rather than simply dividing them up peacefully. And then, notably, it throws in a very human example, a teenage boy racing his hot rod down a residential street.
Placing the teenage boy in the hot rod right alongside the jumping gazelle and the bleeding sea lion is a highly deliberate structural choice. The author is trying to force the reader to see human behavior as animal display.
It is brilliant. When I read that, I immediately thought of corporate advertising. Think about a company spending $10 million on a 30-second Super Bowl ad.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
The ad itself often doesn't even explain what the product does. It just features celebrities and explosions and loud music. Why? Because the company is signaling to the market, look at us. We have so much cash, so many resources, that we can literally set $10 million on fire for a 30-second joke, and our business is still perfectly healthy. The peacock's tail and the teenager's hot rod are the exact same thing.
The biological term for this is the Hafiz handicap principle. The principle states that reliable signals must be costly to the signaler. If it's easy to fake, it's not a reliable signal of genetic fitness.
What is a hot rod? It's loud, drawing the attention of police and rivals.
Right.
It's expensive, draining financial resources. And driving it fast on a residential street is incredibly dangerous, risking physical death. It is a massive handicap.
Just like the peacock's tail, which requires massive energy to grow, hinders flight, and acts as a neon sign for passing foxes.
Exactly.
Notice how the author structures the prose in this section, too. After detailing every single one of these extravagant displays, the author asks the exact same repetitive question. Won't that get him killed?
Jump vertically in front of a tiger. Won't that get him killed?
Grow a 10-pound neon tail. Won't that get him killed?
Drive a car 90 miles an hour down a suburban street. Won't that get him killed?
The implicit answer every single time is yes. It might absolutely get them killed. But the text emphasizes that survival doesn't matter if you die celibate. These handicaps are the ultimate proof of genetic fitness, specifically because they invite death.
Right.
If a gazelle can afford to waste precious escape energy jumping vertically in front of a predator, a behavior called stotting, and still manage to run away, he must possess incredibly fast, fit genes. The female gazelle observes this and concludes, those are the premium genes I want for my offspring. The extreme danger is the proof of quality.
The danger isn't a byproduct. The danger is the entire point. That is a wild concept to wrap your head around, but it begs a massive, obvious question. If, as the text claims, virility is insanity, and our fundamental biology demands this kind of absolute recklessness to prove our worth to the scarce wombs, why aren't 100% of human men dying in hot rod crashes at age 18?
It's a valid question.
What are the biological brakes on this system? Why is there anyone left alive to become a grandfather? The text transitions here by introducing the one piece of anatomical hardware that sets humans apart from the bleeding sea lions and the flashy peacocks.
The author introduces the human neocortex.
The neocortex, the densely packed, highly solid outer layer of the human brain in charge of high-level cognition, spatial reasoning, and crucially, storing and passing on complex information.
Right.
The text states that because we possess this specific brain structure, humans live far beyond our reproductive years. The evolutionary purpose of this long life is to pass down stored wisdom to our offspring. The author uses a great comparison. They argue this neocortex makes bull-elephant men much more safety-conscious than bull-elephant seals.
Consider the life cycle of the bull elephant seal. He grows to massive size, fights brutal, bloody battles on the beach to secure a harem, reproduces furiously, and then once his physical prime fades and a younger rival defeats him, he's biologically useless.
He's done.
He wanders off to die. He cannot pass on wisdom about how to find the best fishing grounds or avoid great white sharks. His singular contribution to the species is his sperm. But human bull elephants, older men, possess the neocortex, which acts as a vast and valuable library of survival strategies.
But this raises a foundational question about the core argument of the deep dive. We spent the entire first half establishing that genes do not care about your personal survival. They only care about replication. So does the human neocortex actually override those ancient suicidal biological urges? Or does it just create a brand new, highly complex, longer-term strategy for our genes? I mean, is a human grandfather passing on wisdom to his grandson just a safer, more cerebral way of fighting off rival sea lions on the beach?
That is the crux of the human exception in evolutionary biology. It isn't that the neocortex cancels out the reproductive drive, it's that the neocortex alters the parameters of how that drive achieves ultimate success. For the very first time in the progression of the text's ideas, survival after the act of reproduction gains tangible genetic value.
Because human children are incredibly vulnerable. If your offspring die before they are old enough to reproduce themselves, you still lose the genetic game. Your lineage is still erased.
Precisely. Compared to a gazelle that can run hours after birth, human children take over a decade to mature and become self-sufficient. The metric of success shifts drastically. It changes from simply conceiving the maximum number of offspring, the sea lion strategy, to ensuring that the offspring you do conceive survive the perils of a complex environment.
Right, because the environment is dangerous.
Very. In human evolutionary history, the stored information of the elders, knowing the migration patterns of herds, identifying medicinal plants, navigating complex tribal social structures, was the critical advantage that kept the youth alive. The neocortex made the grandfather a vital biological asset.
So the 18-year-old hot rod driver is still acting purely on the ancient immediate peacock tail instinct. He's advertising his fitness through danger. But as he ages and perhaps secures a mate, the neocortex slowly shifts his biological strategy from secure the mate at all costs to keep the resulting offspring alive at all costs.
Yes.
And we don't just have to rely on this as an abstract philosophical theory. The text points out that we can track this exact shift from raw, suicidal biological urge to cautious neocortical wisdom in hard, undeniable numbers.
The text brings in the work of population geneticist Alan Rogers to prove this point mathematically.
Alan Rogers looked at insurance statistics, actuarial biology. Actuaries are the people who calculate risk for insurance companies to determine premiums. Their entire job is mapping human behavior to cold, hard financial risk. And what Rogers found in those numbers proved the underlying biology perfectly. The statistics show that young men severely discount the future. They take massive physical risks, they don't plan for tomorrow, and they suffer high mortality rates from accidents. Because biologically, tomorrow isn't promised if you don't secure your place in the gene pool today.
The hot rod driver again.
Exactly. But the actuarial tables show that exact same demographic steadily worries more and more about their future and takes fewer risks as they age into their 30s and 40s.
The text draws a stark conclusion from this data. If you are a young sperm maker, the biological urge to take extreme risks is overwhelming. The author writes, "If you have a womb, young males who take risks seem insane."
If you are a parent listening to this right now and you've watched your teenager do something incomprehensibly dangerous on a skateboard or drive too fast, you aren't watching a failure of intelligence. You are watching a million-year-old biological mandate playing out in your driveway.
It's hardwired.
The text provides this incredible paradox to explain it. For a young male, the sanest way to win the genetic competition is to display his insanity. to act rationally and cautiously and safely as a young male is biologically insane because you will fade into the background and be ignored by the scarce resource. But to act insanely, to be reckless, to drive the fast car, to jump in front of the tiger is biologically rational.
Virility is insanity. Testosterone drives these individuals to take these risks because they are playing a game with the highest stakes possible in the natural world. Lots of offspring or complete erasure.
It is a sobering, slightly terrifying way to view the world. But then, the text ends on a very cryptic, highly fascinating note. After laying out this entire mathematical framework of male insanity, fierce competition, and actuarial biology, the author drops one final thought. The text states that this dynamic not only explains why one man becomes murderously jealous when somebody sleeps with his wife, but it also explains why another man might be perfectly fine with somebody sleeping with his wife.
This raises an important question because it's a deep analytical challenge. The text doesn't explicitly spell out the answer to that final riddle. It leaves it to the reader to deduce the mechanics based on the economic framework that came before.
Well, let's deduce it. How does this single biological framework explain two incredibly extreme, totally opposite human reactions? Murderous jealousy on one hand versus complete apathy on the other.
Let's apply the calculus of supply and demand. Murderous jealousy makes perfect biological sense in this model. If the stakes are lots of offspring or no offspring at all, and the womb is the ultimate scarce resource requiring massive investment, then a mate's infidelity represents the greatest possible threat to a male's genetic legacy.
Right, it's a direct threat.
It is the literal introduction of rival sperm, echoing the Black Widow scenario we talked about earlier. The murderous jealousy is the ancient evolutionary alarm bell ringing, signaling that the male's genetic legacy is about to be hijacked by a competitor. He risks spending his resources raising another man's DNA. The violence is a primal attempt to guard the monopoly.
That covers the crime of passion. That tracks perfectly with the sea lions bleeding on the beach. But what about the other guy? Why would evolutionary biology ever dictate a male being perfectly fine with it?
It reflects a different biological calculus entirely. If a male is perfectly fine with it, it could mean one of two things. First, he might possess an extreme overabundance of options. If he has secured so many extra wombs, practicing widespread polygyny, the loss of exclusivity with one single mate doesn't threaten his overall genetic success.
Oh, I see.
He doesn't need to risk the massive metabolic cost and physical danger of murderous jealousy because his legacy is securely diversified elsewhere.
It's the billionaire walking down the street who doesn't care if he drops a $20 bill. It's not worth the energy to turn around and fight someone over it.
Great analogy. Or, conversely, the apathy could represent a total surrender of the high-stakes game. The male might be so lacking in resources or so completely outmatched competitively that the biological cost of fighting a rival is a guarantee of immediate death. So the biological imperative shifts to apathetic acceptance just to preserve the individual life, even at the cost of the genetic legacy.
Wow.
The drive to survive briefly overrides the drive to reproduce, but only because the reproductive battle is already definitively hopelessly lost.
So both reactions, the violent crime of passion and the completely open relationship, can be traced back to the exact same subconscious ledger of genetic supply and demand. It's an enormous amount to process.
It is. It forces you to view human emotion, even the emotions we consider the most profound or the most destructive, not as ethereal romantic mysteries, but as deeply programmed, highly calibrated survival and reproductive tools.
Which brings us back to you, the listener. We've gone on quite a journey today. We started with the absurdity of Douglas Adams' sci-fi cows begging to be eaten. We explored the suicidal acrobatics of the male Black Widow, the decapitations of the praying mantis, and the fatal flashing neon signs of the lightning bug.
And we mapped out the brutal economics of worthless sperm and scarce wombs.
Exactly. And finally arrived at the actuarial data proving the recklessness of the teenager driving his hot rod. And the reason this matters, the reason we took this deep dive into this stark clinical text, is because it entirely shifts how you view your own daily impulses.
When you understand that beneath our incredibly complex societal behaviors, beneath the expensive cars we buy, the physical risks we take, the deep jealousy or apathy we feel, runs an ancient, unyielding biological program that prioritizes reproduction over our very survival. It gives you a new lens through which to view human history and your own personal choices.
Recognizing when your highly evolved neocortex is doing the driving versus when your ancient, desperate peacock-tail genes are pushing down on the gas pedal can be a profound revelation. It helps explain the seemingly irrational madness of the world around you. So what does this all mean?
It means we're more wired than we think.
Yeah, we've seen how biology engineered us to be reckless. We've seen how the neocortex extended our lifespans to store and pass on wisdom, saving us from the brutal, short-lived fate of the elephant seal. But I want to leave you with a thought, a provocation that builds directly on what this deep dive has laid out.
We established that the human lifespan extended far past our reproductive primes, specifically because the elder human brain was biologically required to store and transmit complex survival data to vulnerable offspring.
But today, we have completely externalized our neocortex. Human technology, cloud computing, and now artificial intelligence permanently store all of our information for us. AI can instantly pass on the accumulated wisdom of 10,000 generations to a child holding a smartphone. The elder human brain is rapidly becoming completely redundant for the raw, basic survival of the offspring.
Which is an unprecedented shift in our evolution.
So if Mother Nature only rewards us with long, post-reproductive lives because we are biologically necessary as living information hard drives and technology permanently takes over that job, will Mother Nature eventually stop rewarding us with long lives? Will the human exception eventually close, slowly returning us to the fast, brutal, purely reproductive lifespan of the elephant seal? It's something to think about the next time you look at a piece of abstract geometry or watch a teenager drive by entirely too fast and wonder what the architecture of your own life really looks like.